Hello, everybody. My name is Dratnos, and today I have a sort of a little soapbox video based on this tweet from Equinox, who's a high-end Monk player you should definitely check out. It says, okay, I have an important question for you guys. If you're playing with someone on a team, do you prefer people with high output but are greedy, or do you prefer people with lower output but aren't greedy? Which I get this question actually quite a lot in my Twitch chat, and my mindset on this has changed in both directions over the course of the years. So I figured this would be a cool video to kind of talk about the idea of greediness and different sorts of players and how you can sometimes end up justifying bad play on both sides of this by, in different ways. So first off, let's just define some terms. What are we talking about here when we talk about high output but greedy versus low output but not greedy, right? Greedy generally refers to play that is either dangerous or selfish for the benefit of your DPS, right? For the benefit of your output, but usually DPS when we're talking about this. It's rare that you think of like a greedy healer, although sometimes, in raid healers, there's that healer that everybody hates because they always usually there it's the case of like I put my healer cooldown in the spot where it does the most HPS, and I make you guys do the ones that save the raid but don't show up as much on the meters. But so let's think about this in terms of DPS mostly, because this usually is where this comes up. And in general, I think most people kind of understand, and I agree with the fact that, the downsides of being too greedy are really big. If you're a player that is constantly getting killed by trying to get more damage, that is very, very bad, right? For raid progression, if you are somebody who dies on 10% of pulls and does 10% more damage, that is just horrific. And I think most people, when they see this, they think that. But a lot of times, there's another case of like, there's a player that actually doesn't die all that much less often than another player, but does like 40% or 30% less damage, and justifies it by saying, yeah, but I'm not a greedy, right? I'm a consistent mechanical player. And that's also that's not a good thing either. That's something that you can get away with it depending on the kind of content that you're in. You can get away with it at a lower or at more levels of content than you can get away with being somebody who dies all the time to being greedy. But ultimately, it is important to do good output, and particularly it's very valuable to have a mindset of output optimization. That is one of the characteristics of, at the very high end of play, being a great player, being like not just a good player, but being a great player of this game, is somebody who's thinking about how do I get the most out of my class on this encounter. So that being said, there's another facet of this, which is the like taking a job that makes your DPS lower is also a valuable thing for a player to have. There would be some encounters where it's like, hey, we need somebody to run this bomb from point A to point B and spend 10 seconds not doing any DPS to the boss. And being a player that is willing to do that is very valuable. Being a player that is willing to do that, will remember to do that on every pull and will not screw it up, is extremely valuable and extremely important. And there are some definitions of greedy where people are just not going to like accept that role being put on them, and that makes them much less valuable, particularly when the spec that they're playing happens to be the spec that is good at that job on an encounter. That is something where like if you're having a mage with blinks not doing that and you're making some, I don't know, Ellie Shaman do that instead on a fight where it's like, they're losing more throughput to do it than the mage would, that's bad. That is something that, yeah, that kind of greedy is definitely bad. But there's another kind of greedy where it's like, hey, this boss is doing a big AoE slam. I need to get out of this circle, but it has a 5-second cast time, right? There are some players who will run out, and 2 seconds into that 5-second cast bar, they will be outside of that boss's smash, right? That is quite a bit of output that you're losing in a lot of cases. There are some players that will stay in for 4 seconds, right? And then they'll step out on the 4th second. And then there are some players who will stay in for 4.99 seconds, and then they'll die 10% of the time because they misjudged the timer, and they'll get killed. That is very bad. It is much less bad to be the person who runs out immediately than it is to be the person who doesn't run out some of the time. But it's valuable to be somebody who can stay in for a couple of the globals on a smash like that, get a little bit of extra damage in. Another factor you have to consider is how much actually am I benefiting from these globals. So in our example here, are these globals that I'm landing on the boss during this smash, are they valuable ones or are they not? Are they in my cooldowns, or do they give me cooldown reduction that means I'm going to get another major cooldown on this fight, right? Is this the last 2 globals of my Vendetta that I'm squeezing in here that are going to be huge extra damage? Or are these just 2 mutilates, right? Something like that, where it's a little bit less important that I get that value. Maybe I need to get out. Maybe it's worth just running out earlier and making sure that I die 0 times ever to this boss ability. That is something that you have to decide on a situation by situation basis. But if you are somebody who just, I see a mechanic that could kill me, I run out, and I don't even think about, okay, next time, could I stay in for longer, right? Like running out the first time you see something as early as possible is a great thing to be doing during progression. But then look and see when it explodes and see if you can make an adjustment in your head that's like, okay, I definitely can stay in there for 1 more global. And then you keep doing that until it's like, okay, I probably ran out at a safe time, right? I'll keep doing it this time. Another important thing to think about is this boss encounter one where we are at a point in progression where damage is important? Or is this boss encounter one where we're at a point in progression where me staying alive is important? At a Race to World First level, the answer is yes. And that's why when you see these Race to World First players in the replies, they're saying you need to do both. For most guilds, it's usually not true that you need both of those things. In most cases, in fact, staying alive is usually the main thing, but during early progression, there are actually times where damage is important too, where it's like, hey, we need to get this boss to 70% so we can see phase 2, and being somebody who can make that happen 5 pulls earlier in progression is valuable. But identifying whether you're at a point in progression where your death is going to get you, like, where you dying is like horrible and means that the pull is dead, versus being at a point in progression where like you're trying to make this push for the first time, you're trying to squeeze out all the damage you can. That is an important thing as well, and worth thinking about. The other thing to think about is this a fight where I'm looking to get some value out of my defensives, or is this a fight that is trying to kill me and I need to save my defensives to use against the mechanics that is trying to kill me with, right? Is this a fight where the boss might randomly target me twice in a row with an ability that does most of my health and damage, in which case I should very preciously guard my Cloak of Shadows for if that happens to me, right? Or is this a fight where there's kind of no threat to me, right? There's nothing that's going to kill me. I don't need my Cloak of Shadows to soak an important mechanic, so I'll just stay in. The next time the boss does this big Shadow Slam, I'll hit the Cloak, and I'll do big damage to the boss, and my Cloak will get turned from kind of a useless defensive that I'd just be holding on to make me feel better into something with offensive value. The extra high-end value thing to do with this is to do the same thing with cheat death type effects, but that's a very rare thing for it to be correct, because almost always it's better to just hold on to your cheat death to potentially save you from death. It's pretty rare that they make fights that can never punish you for using your cheat death offensively. And then the final thing to think about is sometimes you get into situations where, you know, you're trying to finish your cat, right? Like say there's something that causes a spread mechanic, right? Where like you've got a circle growing around you, everybody in the raid has a circle growing around them, right? Like Torment on the Jailer, right? And it's like, okay, we need to not be stacked on top of each other when this mechanic goes off. And say that you are on top of another player and you're both finishing a hard cast, right? And it's like, okay, well, one of us could move, both of us could move, or neither of us could move, right? Neither of us moving means we die, and that's very bad. Both of us moving means that we lose some damage, and that's a little bad, but not too bad at all, much less bad. But one of us moving is the best thing possible, right? So if you can identify in that spot, should I be the person to move? And especially as you get more synergy with your raiding team, if you've got a raiding team that is full of great players that you can trust to make good decisions in spots like this, you know, if you see yourself on top of somebody that you know is good and, you know, is not like a too greedy player, but is a correctly greedy player, then being in that spot where you can recognize like, hey, I am the person that, like, I am the demonology warlock in my demonic tyrant, and this person is a moonkin outside of cooldowns, right? Like, they will move and I should stay still and finish my cast. That's the sort of thing where making that decision correctly can be hugely valuable if the damage is something that's important. But even among really top guilds, that situation is still much rarer than the ones where you can just both move and it can be fine, and you should just both move to avoid being too greedy. So those are some of my thoughts on this question of greed. I think it is an interesting one. I think that usually the answer, is don't be greedy, but sometimes people come with this lower output but aren't greedy when really they're trying to justify having much lower output than they should have. And often when people criticize others for being greedy, it's evidence that they kind of lack that mindset of damage optimization in their heads, right? And it's a really valuable mindset to have if you're trying to become excellent at this game. Is what can I do to get more damage here? And if you take that too far to its extreme, you're going to make greedy plays. But if it's something that you're never thinking about, then you're going to end up leaving a large percent of damage on the table. So those are my thoughts on this question. Hope you enjoyed the video. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Thanks for watching. See you in the next one.